Good day, everyone, everywhere, and special greetings to all those seated in heavenly places in Jesus, our Messiah. You're listening to Cross the Border. I'm Nicklas, and today is our Prophecy Reality Edition, where we turn on the studio cam and we come to you live, open up the chat room. And I have a special guest today, special treat for everyone, Greg Anthony. Loud and clear. Can you hear me, Greg?
Yes, I can, Nick. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. Looks like everything's working perfectly.
Yes. Hopefully so, At least on the air here. I don't know about in the world today.
Well,
anyway.
Yeah, I'm just referring to all the technical stuff. Being my own producer and doing things live like this, sometimes it can be pretty tricky. But after a while, I guess you can get good at anything.
Okay.
Hey, I sent you an article on the unholy trinity that rules the world, and I guess that's a good jumping off point for where we can start our discussion, and perhaps some of our listeners may have questions for you about your name change. These things have come up during other broadcasts.
Well, first of all, let me explain. I didn't change my name. I just use my middle name. My middle name is Anthony. So I use Greg Anthony, and the reason I do that is it makes it a lot easier for people because I found over the years nobody could pronounce my last name.
Right. Yeah, it was always a problem when I first heard your last name. You kind of unsure, and you don't want to say it for fear of saying it wrong.
And plus, with this stigma of Polish people in America and all the Polish jokes, I just thought perhaps people might think I'm really stupid if I use that name.
Ah, I see. Yeah. Well, my mother was Polish and had a Polish name too, so I understand all about it.
But let me tell you something, though. When I lived in Europe for 7 years, they didn't even know what a Polish joke was.
Really?
And in fact, they felt they would say I was from Poland. They say, "Man, that's a very, very interesting and prospering country at one point in history." And there was so much that happened there. So in America, we've brought over these stigmas like all Irish people are drunks, all Italians are in the mafia, and all Polish people can't screw in a light bulb. And really, it's not true. So
right.
Anyway.
Well, anyway, I wanted to correct you on your name. You're not using your middle name. You're using your given name. Your given name is Greg Anthony, and your family name is Szymanski. So I would say I'm using my given name.
Okay.
Because the whole middle name thing, that's kind of a purely American thing that they use for identification. And anyway, just a note there. You have a passport, you'll notice that it has surname, which means your family name for your what they call your last name. But
okay,
anyway,
and I guess, like Cher, you've gotten to such celebrity that you only need one name.
Yeah, we could all only hope for that. All right. Yeah, we'll just call you Greg. How about that?
That's fine.
Anyway, the unholy trinity that rules the world. Do you believe it?
Of course. Well, let me say this. Let me go back to a personal experience. And in this article, you'll see they include the first picture is the picture of the obelisk in St. Peter's Square. And I walked by that thing perhaps every day for years. And when I first went there back in the early 80s, I had no idea what that meant. And as I stayed in Rome, I learned really what this was all about. And the idea of these symbols are quite important in the occult and in the actual worship of what they really worship. They use Christ. They use Jesus. They use Christianity as a cover for Babylonian religion. And the real interesting thing about this is that if you listen to mainstream media, if you listen to a lot of even the alternative media, and you won't get that on your show, and thank God for that, is that Catholicism likes to call itself Christianity, and it isn't. And I always make the distinction that there is Roman Catholicism, there is Christianity, basically in the pure form of Bible believing, and there has to be a distinction made. But they love to mesh everything together And it is a fallacy because Roman Catholicism is steeped in traditions, steeped in occult traditions that I grew up in. And I, as a Catholic, growing up in grade school, high school, being indoctrinated with this stuff, know it all too well. And the real key to this story lies in that symbol because of what's going on today in the world. And if we look at that symbol, we'll find one in Washington, D.C., another obelisk, and we'll find one in London. And these three cities have so much in common. But let's just talk about that obelisk and where it comes from. It's really a worship of Isis and all the different names that are given to her, Semiramis, and all the different Babylonian symbols. And I believe the reason they use Isis now is a symbol to tell you that they are leading to a massive, massive war, a holy war that they're calling it a holy or unholy war now on the mainstream. And this symbol Isis really tells you who created it, who created this last enemy we may see. So anyway, that's just a preface to what I see in this article. Go ahead.
So you think it's kind of a subliminal message about what's really going on? It's kind of like a tell for those that might understand.
Yes, of course. And for those that study this, they all too well know it. And when you try to explain this to people, you must go back to ancient Babylonian religions. And my idea for anybody listening is this. The reason to do this is that it makes sense. And it makes too much sense for the alternative, the majority of the alternative media and the mainstream. And the reason they don't do it is because it's factual. It gives you a clarity of where you came from, where your country came from, and where your religions came from. And exactly what I'm talking about is Catholicism is steeped in these symbols. And this major symbol, that is the one that you see when you first walk through St. Peter's Square. I mean, this is so obvious. And when you look at the meaning, and I've done many shows on your station regarding Isis, who she is in Babylonian worship, where this comes from and why, and just to give you a short rendition of it, the reason it's difficult to understand is this, in pagan religions, they're given many different names. And so in Egypt, it may be called Isis. In Greece, it may be called Aphrodite. But don't get confused. Let's just use Isis instead of Semiramis, which was used in Babylon. Okay, so here we have this statue. Now, what is it? Where did it come from? Well, anyway, in the pagan religions, her husband was her brother, and he basically was killed by another god and torn into 14 pieces.
Right.
Now, she went around and collected all these pieces, and the only one she couldn't collect was his penis. So she resurrected it through this statue that she created, this obelisk. And through mystery Babylon religions, she conceived a sun god. Okay? And so now, this kind of thing sits Isis kind of as if you look at the similarity between Isis, Semiramis, and Mary, how the Vatican worships Mary, it's the same. And this statue symbolizes this goddess, symbolizes who they worship and who they are, and that is why they selected Isis as our big enemy today. And it all goes back, and I recommend your readers really do a study of the sun goddess Isis and this story, because that's what the Washington Monument is all about. That's what this monument here in St. Peter's Square is all about. That's what the one in London is all about. And my question to you is, why would... Now, knowing that this preceded Catholicism, preceded the formation of our country, why would a Christian country want this as our symbol of freedom? Why? Unless there was a hidden agenda back when this was put up in our founding fathers. Why would the Vatican want this? If they're true Christians, They would never want this symbol there. And why would London put it there? Now, the next thing we talk about is the similarities of, they're all three little city countries within a country. Vatican, created during the time of Mussolini, is a 100-acre country within Rome. Washington, D.C. is not a part of the United States, similar to what the Vatican is all about. And there is London. The London where this obelisk resides is carved out and is not a part of England or London. They have a flag, and this article talks about all that. So it's really good information for your listener to begin to answer two questions. One, where did your religion come from if you happen to be one of the 2 billion that worship Catholicism? And two, if you happen to be an American, where did your country come from? And why do they use this as a symbol of freedom? Two major questions.
Well, Greg, I don't think the American people use it as a symbol of freedom, but I think it was foisted upon them by, the unholy trinity that rules the world, because, they created Washington, D.C., and that's what
Exactly.
I cover a little bit in my article. A lot of people don't realize that Washington, D.C. is a separate country. It's not one of the 50 states of the United States of America, of what were free and independent states until the Civil War, when they were combined into one nation, and then we were fed the propaganda to make us believe that that's the way it was intended to be. But I believe my article adequately burst the bubble on that delusion, if people will read it. But most people won't even unplug their ears for a minute to hear what's being said here and to understand why there is a phallic symbol in the middle of these 3 city-states, one being the religious capital of the world, one being the economic capital of the world, and of course the other being supposedly being the capital of the free world, but in reality it is the military capital of the world.
Right. I call us the Roman Legion, the the actual military force behind Pontifex Maximus. And the idea of the distant, I can remember doing shows on the same exact subject that you're talking about, so we're in agreement here that these subjects, Washington, D.C. is not a part of our country, and it's carved out for a reason. And when we look back at the history of how our country was formed, this was thrust upon us. And we're fed to believe that this symbol, this Washington Monument, is a symbol of freedom. But where does it really come from? And it gives you a clue of who created this country. And in my view, it's a whole subject that needs to be discussed by intelligent people who research, because you're not going to get this anywhere on most of the alternative stations and the mainstream. And the reason you're not is because they are basically, it makes too much sense, and they do not want you to know this. And they are there to cover up this story, and they are paid quite well for it. And so thank God for sites like yours and stations like yours that still want to discuss this, because I've said all along, whether you're a Christian or whether you're an atheist or whatever you are in America, you need to understand how this is not just a secular adventure by the Freemasons, but it is a spiritual, in a sense, pagan movement that has filtered into our society, and we need to understand this. And I believe that by understanding this, you can have you can function in society a little bit better. And people always ask me, well, what are you going to do about it? And I say, well, listen, there was a time when I felt best thing, we could get rid of this, we could overthrow this, but I knew that was naive. And as I look at it now, they want you to revolt. They want you to become this kind of adversarial citizen that says, I'm going to fight you to the end. And the reason they do that is that's a good way for them to put you in jail, or a good way for you to kill you, and they will basically say that you're opposed to God, Nicklas, and you're opposed to the American Constitution, and we are protecting our citizens from people with ideas like yours. And so I say, don't revolt. Then they want you to either, if you don't want to revolt, you want to hide away in some, as a survivalist. And I say, don't do that either. Because what good are you in that respect to your fellow man? None. So my basic idea is to just make yourself available to tell people this that want to learn, and that will be a great service to your fellow man. And thank God there's people like you that do that.
Yeah,
So
well, and that's what our listeners can do. For instance, is tell people about your broadcast, my broadcast, First Amendment Radio, and they can help get the word out that way. I wanted to talk about this idea. I've been kind of hearing rumblings, and now I hear it coming from you, of a holy war of course, Christianity represented by the Vatican against Islam. Is this?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this is a reality, something we're going to see in the near future, a World War III religious war that's going to be openly professed to be Christianity against Islam?
Yes, exactly. And the reason I do listen to mainstream news all the time is to listen what they're telling us. And they give you a lot of clues on what's going to happen. And although they do play the Hegelian dialectic, and so you can listen to the left on CNN, the right with Bill O'Reilly and those people. But yes, many people are right now coming out calling it a holy war. And then, of course, the Vatican, they bring on a priest who says, no, it's an unholy war. And it's a war between Christian and freedom and the Muslim world. And basically, yes. Then we have a pundit coming on, a military pundit, saying this is going to be a long 30 years war. This isn't going to be something that's going to end tomorrow, so get used to it. So yes, they are gearing up for the largest war that we've known in our time. And I think that it's being billed as a holy war. That's what they're telling you. That's why they're bringing out the beheadings. That's why they're showing you exactly what they did back during the time of the Crusades. And the way they cover this is this way. Well, you know something? We were fighting the Muslims and we protected Christianity against these heathens who were beheading everyone. Now, the point I'm trying to make is they never bring up the Reformation and how the same organization, the Vatican, was beheading and killing Bible believers. So the point I'm trying to make is they are gearing up again to get rid of most, they want basically
Well, wouldn't this just be a ploy to consolidate all of Christianity into one camp, that being the camp led by the Vatican, to make all of the potential Protestants or protesters against the Vatican become adherents?
Oh, of course, and that's a good point to bring up, because you're also going to hear that, ISIS right now is threatening to kill the Pope and to threaten the Vatican. So automatically, people that don't really understand how this operates think that the Vatican is on your side, is on the side of the Protestants, is on the side of America, when in fact it's not that way. And yeah, you're exactly right. They want to consolidate Christianity against the Muslim world, and the battle lines are going to be drawn. And it's going to be a bloody battle that I believe there is no other way it's going to come to the shores of America for the first time in our history, where we see exactly what happened to these other countries when they were invaded. We see it right here. Now, I can't tell you when, but I know that must be their plan.
Okay, so really what we're looking out for then is some kind of limited terrorist attacks that using weapons of mass destruction here on the northern continent.
I don't think you're going to see the invasion of Normandy on the west coast of California by our adversaries. No, you're going to see, these kind of attacks on that you can't predict. I mean, you will have, and that's why they're gearing up by creating all this internal. How many Americans now joined ISIS? How many Londoners are now involved in ISIS? And they're building this kind of internal terrorist situation where every American's going to feel frightened to go shopping, going to feel frightened to go here and to go there.
Well, 9/11 was kind of like a precursor to what we're talking about, but I think that they're going to have to pull off something bigger because, something actually using, say, a nuclear suitcase or something in a highly populated area, because they need an event that is going to consolidate the world in this religious war against radical Islamists or Muslims that will not bend the knee to the Vatican, the Big Daddy Pope.
Right, and you're exactly right. And it's hard to say. Yeah, I would say that too. I mean, they're going to do. It's got to be something that will exactly move this war forward. Now, here's an interesting take on this. If you look at what really happened when Bush declared a crusade after 9/11, he was a hawk. He was basically moving into there, and it 9/11 gave him the incentive, gave him the justification to go in and bomb and kill many innocents in the Middle East. Well, now that we have a new president, Obama, you can see him taking the exact opposite approach. He's a dove. He's doing everything possible to allow ISIS to grow. Yes. And then, of course, you have the right wing who's fighting him tooth and nail. And it's basically, if you can't, Americans, see the orchestration of this, why isn't he a hawk? We could wipe out ISIS like that if we're the strongest military power.
Well,
we have a president now who is capitulating.
Well, perhaps he is nothing more than an assigned Roman procurator over the American states.
Oh, yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, he's there. He's playing, and I like to put it this way. That's a good way to put it. I like to say he's an actor hired by Rome to play this part, the American president, and this is what you're to do. And basically, it's the same thing.
Yeah, well, more than an actor, he takes his orders from Rome, even though publicly he stands against them. But we know who trained him. We know where he gave his money before he became president to Catholic charities. That was the only charitable deductions he took on his income tax before he became president, and that was to Catholic charities. That's because he was trained by Jesuits. And when he was a community organizer, you didn't know that?
No, I didn't. That's good. That's good information.
They published his tax returns leading up to his inaugural years as president. Anyway, we're going to go into a break here, Greg, and we'll come back and discuss further these things on the other side. Everybody, you're listening to Across the Border. This is our Prophecy Reality Edition. We'll be right back. Will be canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org. Okay, welcome back. You're listening to our Prophecy Reality Edition of Cross the Border. We have our guest, Greg Anthony, and we're discussing the unholy trinity that rules the world. I don't see any questions. We just ask Greg if he still has connections to the American Free Press. I'll let you field that one, Greg. We got a question in the chat room.
No, that was a long, long time ago. And how that happened was right around the time I graduated from law school, 9/11 came around, and I decided to do some. I was originally, of course, as people know, if they listen to my show, a journalist. And so I decided to write about 9/11. And I wrote very sparingly about the Vatican at the time because I was still putting the pieces together here in the United States. Because Italy was a whole different story, and I understood what they were doing in Europe, but I didn't quite know America, and I really didn't. So I was gathering information regarding people who really understood what the Vatican was all about. And so I concentrated heavily on writing about 9/11. And
so basically some of your stories got into the American Free Press then.
Well, here's how it happened. Yeah, they called me and asked if I would want to write for them on a steady basis and pay me X amount of money for articles, right?
Yeah, I'm a journalist. Sure, I want to write.
Sure. So I would get 2 or 3 stories in a week, and they'd pay me a couple $100 per story, right?
Yeah.
And I realized, what really happened was they would not talk much about the Vatican, and through my stories on the American Free Press, I got to know what that organization was about a little bit. And then, of course, my shows, Alex Jones then was interested in who I was, and he would put me on his shows. And that led to a show on Genesis that I had running, and it also led to a show on Republic Broadcasting Network with John Stadtmiller, which was very popular. And I started then, during that period of time, to start covering and emphasize the Vatican. And as I did that, here's exactly how the chips fell. The American Free Press no longer would cover my articles, print my articles. John Stadtmiller at the Republic Broadcasting Network gave me an ultimatum. Either you quit covering the Vatican so heavily or you're not going to be on the air. So that I was off the air. I made the decision. I actually had to think about that. And I said to myself, well, okay, I could cover this up, play his game, and still get a lot of, keep my financial broadcast going, which was earning me a living. Or I could refuse. And I refused, and so that led to me being kicked off of Republic. And then, of course, I could not exist with Alex Jones on that station because there was a clause in my contract with Genesis that said I could not criticize Alex Jones in public or I'd be fired, as he would criticize me. I mean, he would openly call me crazy and all this stuff. And so I finally said, I got to realize, figure out who these people are. And so I understood the American Free Press is controlled opposition, so is Republic, and so is Genesis.
And you know how they're controlled? When you start making hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a year, you have to start fearing losing it. And if you love money more than the truth, well, then you capitulate to the control. Isn't that how it works, Greg?
Well, I guess so. I actually was in Austin and saw how Republic Broadcasting worked, and they had this huge office and a lot of money coming in and very little advertising. So I said, where's all this coming from? Pretty obvious.
And if you don't capitulate, you end up with people like Tony Alamo, Kent Hovind, and there's Tupper Saucy. And, I did want to discuss the Tupper Saucy influence on you a little bit, because I know that you've read his book, Rulers of Evil. Can you tell me what kind of influence that book has had on you and in challenging your way of thinking or shaping it?
Well, first of all, I had known about Tupper Saucy prior to his this was prior to his death. And he had already printed Rulers of Evil, but got to know him through a couple emails before he died. And also got to know him through his book Miracle on Main Street, which was a book that really got him in trouble with the Vatican and the IRS. And in fact, he went on the lam for 10 years because he feared that if he was going to go to prison for these false charges of IRS violations, that he would be killed there, because he was working on a book at the time about James Earl Ray and the real killing behind Martin Luther King. So he started his research by this, and I asked him once, I said, well, what spurred you on? And he said, well, I found out that my prosecutor was a Jesuit priest. And I said, oh, that's interesting. He was actually a Jesuit priest. So many of them are out there in the world with not wearing the collar. So, yeah, then I remember talking to him, and he said, you know something? This book is the tip of the iceberg of things, and I know you've been working on other areas. Read my book. You'll find so many interesting things. And concentrate, he said, in the years to come, I'm going to concentrate on this formation of America and the corruption of our founding fathers from the beginning. And Greg, please do the same. We need more research on all this. So he was a very open man, a man who was constantly moving forward. His book, I recommend anybody read it. And I don't read it to believe it. Read it to put it side by side with what you've learned. And it's been a great influence to me to keep going, to really think about how this information is gathered, who puts it there, and some of his, getting to the spirituality of Tupper Saucy. Some of the things that he writes at the end are quite controversial, but yet interesting even for the Bible believer, who may not agree with his version of Cain, who may not agree with his version of certain things. But to me, it's an inspiration that a man, and he was very, very biblically oriented. He wasn't a fraud. He believed in the Word of God. He believed in it to his last breath. And he believed that if you did not believe in the Word of God, you would have a hard time grasping what's going on in this secular world that he'd like to call, the Babylon of this fantasy world that we live in. And so I wanted you guys to know that he was a very, 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 very close to the Bible.
Well, I understand that. I've read his book, and it's obvious, especially to a Bible believer like myself, someone who knows the Word of God very well, that he was genuinely a Bible believer. And he had some ideas that were, might have been a little bit out there, but that doesn't, you don't have to be 100% right to be right with God. I'll say
exactly. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I like that. Yeah,
because none of us are. 100% right.
You know what's the interesting thing about this book is that it was done under duress in his life. And it wasn't done as just a purely academic book. And that's what I like to tell people, because what he was doing, when he wrote this book, he was really he was on the lam. He was being hunted down by the IRS, and he was a firm believer that this experience in his life brought out the best in his research, where he could actually look and get to the bottom so he could help people wade through this world that we live in. And it is so amazing when I talk to people who I've given this book to and read it. Every one of them that I've given it to that really reads it comes away and says, you know something? I got to look at this again. I got to read this part of that book.
That's
I got to
right.
go, and I got to really do my own research. Because remember what he told me. He said this. He said, listen, this is the beginning, and I've got more I want to do, and anybody out there that gets this book, please use it as a starting point to find out more.
Yeah.
And he was also very open, and he said, listen, if you found anything I've made mistakes on, if you disagree with me, let me know. And if you disagree with parts of this book, write about it, talk about it. But I tell you what, it gets to a lot of the history of the United States that I get so tired of people going, let's go back to the founding fathers, and
right.
and the beauty of Christianity.
Well, they don't have a clue. They don't have a clue, Greg. And I just put a link to the book in the chat room, and I also have a link on my website to that book on the Bible Studies pages. they'll find a listing of books there, and F. Tupper Saucy's Rulers of Evil is one of those books. So everyone should read this. It should give you pause to seriously consider the things that are written therein and change your way of viewing the world. That's for sure. Go ahead, continue, Craig.
Yeah, and, one of the subjects I like to get about, I talk to a lot of people that don't understand a lot of this stuff. And the ones that are interested, they categorize, they say, well, what are you? What are you as far as politically? And I always go, well, listen, I'm pretty much a conservative. And they go, what? A conservative with those ideas? I said, yes, if you look at these ideas, they are conservative ideas. They are ideas founded in many conservative ideas about this country, about really getting to the truth. And I think a conservative idea in America is getting to the truth. And where it leads, no one really knows all the time. But that's the point I'm trying to make, is that this is not a conspiracy theory. This is not based on things that aren't factual. Of course, there are things we're trying to piece together that we can't prove yet, because of the fact that much of this information has been sanitized throughout history. I think much of this information is kept in the Vatican archives, which were transported from Constantinople, I believe. That brings up a whole idea of where Islam came from, really, and the East and the West civilizations in Rome, which I really recommend people researching, because it's not as it's told in the history books. So what I'm getting at is this search, and this search for the truth comes in many forms, and it is really a benefit for America to really face the truth and face what you consider to be the truth compared to what you're being presented by people like yourself, like others out there who are researching this and starting to realize that we've been given a really bogus history lesson. We've been given a bogus lesson in our churches, and it's great to be liberated from all this stuff, is all I'm saying. And in that sense, isn't it great to feel as almost in your heart, at least, a free American? I like that feeling.
Yeah, well, I do too, and I talk about that a lot. A lot of people view the things that we're saying with fear and trepidation because it shatters their illusion of freedom, which is only an illusion. But without the truth, you aren't free. You're a slave to lies, and you're controlled by other people. But there's the faith aspect of it. Without faith, well, you do live in fear because you have no hope. So, our hope, of course, I find my hope in the same place that F. Tupper Saucy found his hope, which he puts on open display toward the end of his book, especially, and that is his hope in the resurrection that is promised to those that are faithful to God and go after it. So.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And I like to say to people out there, my show deals with a lot of these subjects, and I try to appeal to all people, whether you are strong in faith or weak in faith. And I think that is apparent in some of the Gospels when you read some of them. And I'm by no means a Bible scholar, but just by the subjects that I deal with, I can talk about the Bible. And what I see in some of the apostles back then was a constant. They weren't basically just blind followers. They had periods of doubt. They had periods where their faith was tested. They had periods where they woke up completely faithful. They had periods where they woke up and they were doubtful of Christ. But in the end, they never lost the ability to resurrect that faith, to give up on themselves, to give up on Christ, or to give up on their faith. But I don't think, for example, I've known two types of Christians in my life. I mean, I'm not talking about those that are faking it or thinking they're faking it, but I'm talking about people that have grown up somehow with this faith that is so amazing to me that they've had it since childhood. And then there's people like me who have had faith and then doubted it and go back and forth and struggle with it. And the point I'm making is that is only something I believe you and God can determine. And it bears no true witness if you say something and someone wants to be reassured, oh, Greg is a faithful Christian. And I know, no, that's not important. The important thing is, what is your relationship with God?
Well, speaking of your relationship with God, tell me a little bit about your transition from Catholicism to true Bible Christianity. What's that been like?
Difficult. Catholicism to me was as a young boy, was very, very wholesome to me. It was a way of feeling close to God. I felt that in my heart. Priests to me were very, very important in my life. I never had any bad experiences. They were. It was a very comforting feeling as a child. In fact, I used to feel the things I was taught in catechism class. I never saw a Bible when I was young.
Right.
The things I was taught in catechism was that I would belong to the best and the biggest church, and I could get closer to God than anybody. And I felt sorry for some of my Protestant Lutheran friends. And that's the truth when I was a kid. And as I grew up and went into my teens and started to, oh, man, this is crazy doing all these stuff. I can't, and starting to be acclimated to the world, I was just basically a Catholic in name. And basically as I got older, that's my phone, I'll just let it ring. As I got older, I fell away from that and became kind of like an atheist, okay?
Right.
And then when I went to Rome and saw what they were really all about, I went there almost thinking, well, maybe I'll get back into the church. I'm close to Rome. I'm there. Then when I saw what they're really about and understood it, I had a very difficult time facing it. I was basically angry that I'd been deceived, angry that I was led to believe all these stupid things, and basically started to read the Bible and started to understand certain things. And as I did that, I became like a child again and began to meet people that were much more versed in the Bible than me. I made it a point to talk with people, to go to every place I could to understand these things, and I felt I was a strong believer. But then again, it creeped into me, oh man, no, I can't be, So Catholicism really kind of makes it hard for me, even to this day, because I see a lot of this, and I don't want to be deceived again. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yes.
And so I'm really careful, and so many people get the wrong impression of me, even people that closely know me. They say, well, you say you're a Christian, but then you question all this stuff. And I say, well, you know what? I guess if I was born to a different religion, if I was born into something that didn't deceive me so badly, I wouldn't be this way. But I am a product of it. And so, yes, that faith to me is constantly challenged on a daily basis. And I will not let it go. And sometimes I feel like I'm holding on to it with a string. Other times I feel like I'm on a strong foundation.
Well, I think any faith worth holding to should stand up against any trial you can throw against it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so you'll hear me a lot of times question a lot of things. And I believe that, in a sense, makes it, for me anyway, it helps build on my faith, because I was deceived so badly as a kid. And I guess I could have just forgotten about it, like many Catholics, and say, oh, forget about the whole thing. None of it makes any sense. And that's easier to live that way, but it isn't living the truth. And I guess that's why I chose journalism to begin with. But anyway, that's where I stand. So, anytime people question, I kind of look at it this way, Nicklas. It's really important between you and God. And and you know when you're having difficult times. And we always look for and no human being can really help you with that. You can be led in certain ways, but you're going to have to get right with God in your own way. And I think at the times when you've been tested, and in the times when you're weak, and you know who to call upon to gain that strength, I think. And that's kind of the way I look at it. So it's kind of private to me, and at times don't like speaking about it, because sometimes it's the wrong impression is given. And I think I don't want to do that, if you know what I mean. Perhaps you don't, but anyway, that's my view.
Well, it is a personal thing, something that everyone has to decide for themselves. I'm in total agreement with that statement.
But there is one thing though. When I talk this way and I start looking at it, for some reason, I don't know why I was brought to Rome. I really don't. I don't think it was a coincidence. I think I was there for a reason, and I think my life has a reason for being. And that to me is more important, and I think everyone needs to search for that reason for being. And it isn't given to you by yourself and your ego and others. It's given to you by a higher power. And you got to respect that. And I feel fortunate that God has given me the chance to learn these things, because it would have been so easy just not to, Yeah,
well, as they say, ignorance is bliss, but some of us just cannot be happy with ignorance.
Exactly.
Okay, well, Greg, this has been a great hour. You got a broadcast you're doing every day here on First Amendment Radio, and you're covering some topics and going quite into depth and quite a few things. What are some of the things that you feel that you've really been called to uncover and expose on your broadcast that people should listen for?
One, the historical idea of what America's all about. Two, the difference between Roman Catholicism and Christianity. And then three, how the media operates. And so you can understand and go to the right places, because, time is an element here. We don't have all the time in the world. And we're here for a short period of time. And so let's use our time wisely. And that's basically why I do my show, so I can cut to the chase on certain things, and people can look up things and start thinking on their own. And hopefully my show helps them do that.
Okay, I noticed recently you've revived your website, and you're going to start keeping that up. So you might want to let people know where that is, so they can.
Yeah. In fact, I put
touch.
Your article up there. I didn't know you wrote it, so I'll put your name on that. But I did want to put that article. It was a good article, and I know I will put your name on that. I didn't know it was you, because you just put posted. But anyway, yeah, it's Arctic, ARCTICBEACON.com. And I'm reviving all my shows. I have somebody helping me putting up the old shows. And the website, I've made it, used to be a subscription for a while, but it's now free and open. And you can get all the articles in the past, and I'll be writing some new ones. And also, if you feel the urge, you can donate, because we do not have corporate sponsorship for obvious reasons. And I want to keep the show going. So
okay.
There it is.
And other things you're doing, you're working on some plays, and you're doing some acting, things like that, briefly?
Yeah, I'm working on 2 screenplays, one regarding Tony Alamo, and 2 regarding Tupper Saucy, and theater plays and screenplays. They're both, it's kind of a joint project. And the reason I'm doing it is because I really, as a journalist and a law school graduate, I believe that both sides of all stories should be told, and I wanted people to understand these 2 men. And when I see the way the media has covered, especially Alamo, I get very frustrated, and I wanted to see the other side of his story. And it brought up so many similarities to what the Vatican has done in the past to people who have criticized them. i.e. Alberto Rivera, a number of other people, that I had to really delve into this story. And I thought a good way to do it was to broadcast it, but yet to write something that would remain after these broadcasts, where I could actually see if I could get a stage play done, because it's hard to get these stories in Hollywood. And as a SAG actor, I have revived my acting career, so I do that to make some money and to stay active in that, because I enjoy it.
Okay.
So it's hand in hand.
We're out of time. I want to thank you, Greg, for coming on with me today. It's been insightful and entertaining. And everyone should watch for your broadcasts on First Amendment Radio and visit your website, arcticbeacon.com. Thank you, Greg.
Okay, thank you, Nicklas.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, we'll be back for another hour of Prophecy Reality. I don't know where we're going to go, but perhaps we'll look at headlines or talk a little bit more about the unholy trinity that rules the world.